Hello everyone, my name is Evelyn and I'm a principal architect at Salesforce, and today we'll be covering the advanced session of OmniStudio FlexCards. Before we jump into the slides, forward-looking statement applies here, so any purchasing decisions should be made on software that is globally available. Few words about me. As I said, I'm an architect at Salesforce, part of the Shared Success Group, and I live in Vienna, Austria. My focus is the UI platform of Salesforce Industries across all verticals. I really enjoy working with Lightning Web Components, Lightning Web Runtime, OmniStudio, and other technologies outside of the Salesforce ecosystem like Node.js. Now, let's look at the agenda for today. We'll do a quick recap of the architecture of FlexCards. We'll have a look at debugging, selectable items, styling as a bit more advanced topics. We'll have a look at embedding a custom Lightning Web component inside FlexCards. We'll also talk about embedding FlexCards into Omni scripts, running FlexCards off-platform with Omni out capability, and then finally some considerations regarding the new OmniStudio runtime and troubleshooting tips and resources that might be useful to the ecosystem. And then I'll do a quick demo and show you a very common use case of embedding a FlexCard into OmniScript and creating case selectable items. So let's start. A quick recap of the FlexCard architecture from our previous session. It's a fluid JSON-driven metadata architecture that is stored in one of our business process objects. We generate Lightning Web components at design time with definition cached in the component. We do support n levels of embedded FlexCards and recursiveness, meaning we don't have a limit on how many cards you can embed into each other, and we could also support running the same card recursively into itself, as long as we can provide the proper structure for those cards. And of course, we have an extensive support regarding styling. So you could easily style your components, or you could add CSS on card level, and that will be converted basically on compile time. On the right hand side, you can see some of the elements that we support within FlexCards. We have different UI elements and actions. We can embed FlexCards into FlexCards. You can add your own custom components, and you can also invoke OmniScript from FlexCards, which is another product of the OmniStudio package. We have quite powerful event framework, meaning you could declaratively add event listeners or declaratively fire an event from a certain action on the card. And we have quite an enhanced version of the conditional views capabilities, right? So you could add quite a complex group condition on the FlexCard elements. Now, a few words about debugging FlexCards, right? When you preview your card, on the right hand side, you will get a data JSON which shows the hierarchy of the data and other variables that are related to that particular card. So you should be able to see what the card receives and what is the payload that the card is working with. Additionally, there is an action debugger. From the action debugger, you'll be able to see what actions were fired, what input that action received, and what was the output from that particular action. So especially when you have a lot of events that you're working with, the action debugger is really nice because it can show you what was received, what was sent, and so on. And of course, you could rely on the browser to, inspect the HTML, see the tag of your components, or see what class was added to your components, and so on. So do please work with the browser as well and the dev tools to investigate your FlexCards deeper if you're debugging a particular issue. Now we have support for something called selectable items within FlexCards. So we make it easy for you through a declarative way to allow a user to select a particular item, and that could either be a single select or a multi-select. Additionally, we could capture those selected items and either fire that list of selected items to a sibling component or update an Omni script. So an example could be embedding a FlexCard into an Omni script. The user selects certain items, and then you want to maintain or persist that selection within your Omni script. And the good thing is that this is all done through configuration, and so there's no code involved in making these cards selectable. What about global styling or styling in general? As you know, the OmniStudio package comes with two flavors when you create your FlexCards. One is the standard Salesforce Lighting design system, and the other one is the Newport design system. So when should I choose what? We have a couple of guidelines here that might help you, but again, this could be very specific for a particular customer. In general, we recommend using Newport for global branding across pages. So if you want to bring your customers' look and feel into the org and style your FlexCards as per their corporate identity look and feel, you could use Newport, which gives a good amount of control, and you could load this globally on the page and bypass certain limitations of the web component nature. What about SLDS? Of course, it's always a matter of choice, but mostly SLDS is used for internal pages, right? A page that would look similar to any other Salesforce page. And finally, we often get asked the question, what about individual FlexCards, right? I might want to do a particular style change on a particular card. There is an option to inject your own CSS file on card level, and that is documented on our website. And of course, you could apply conditional styles to different elements within your FlexCards. Now, what is a conditional style? A conditional style is just like the conditional view, right? So you can create n number of conditional styles which will have a different execution criteria, and that execution criteria could be based off certain expressions or the data that the card receives, right? So an example could be the status of an account, right? You might want to compare that to a given value and apply different colors, fonts, and other styles based on that. So you could really use that for quite dynamic look and feel of your cards based on the data that that particular card receives. Additionally, on top of that, we give you the option to add a CSS class on the particular element level or on the container element level, right? So if you want to target a particular element or create your own custom class, you have the option to do that as well. And all of these features are just under the Style tab within the FlexCard Designer. Right, what about bringing our own components inside FlexCards? You could create your own custom Lightning Web component, and you could reference that within your FlexCard. Unlike the Omni script, where we have the option to extend an Omni script based mixin and use some of the APIs of the Omni script framework, we don't have a dedicated mixin here, meaning you can use the attributes to pass any data from the FlexCard into your custom component. You can decide to pass the entire payload or a particular record within the iteration of the FlexCard, or any other attribute of your choice, a session variable or a parent attribute, and so on. Communicating back from the custom LWC into the container card could be done through the event framework. So you can always fire a event, a standard DOM event, and then capture it from the FlexCard and then execute a subsequent action. Right. I highly recommend using this for also bringing other base components from the OmniStudio package. So just like in the example here, you won't find the accordion as a standard element within FlexCards, but accordion is a base component of the OmniStudio package. So you can just reference that component and read the documentation of what attributes it supports, and you can directly use it within your FlexCards without building it from scratch. Right. So that's quite a powerful feature that would allow you to bring any component from the OmniStudio package, and look into those would be the recommendation before building your own component. OmniScript support. We can run FlexCards inside OmniScript, and there is a particular toggle under the setup of the FlexCard that would allow that card to be embedded into a FlexCard. To be embedded into an OmniScript. When do you need to use that toggle? If you want your FlexCard to communicate with the OmniScript, update its data, and so on, then your toggle needs to be switched on. If you want to run your FlexCard as a standalone component, you don't have to use that toggle. Just make sure that you use the standalone checkbox here when you embed your FlexCard. What's the benefit of this? Just like with the selectable items example, you can build your FlexCard UI, and you might decide to bring it into a guided type of experience where you allow the user to take some actions on the FlexCard and then persist that data within the OmniScript. So that's where the OmniScript support comes into the picture. Right. Next we have Omni out for FlexCards. What does that mean? It means that we can build our FlexCards on platform within the Salesforce environment and then execute those same FlexCards outside of the Salesforce platform. We can just download them and execute them within an Omni out application. For the people that have not seen the Apex Hours session on Omni out, I highly recommend that because it covers most of the things on how to set it up, and it's also valid for FlexCards. So I'll just quickly mention that we compile Lightning Web Components into industry standard web components, or LWC OSS. Those can be deployed into any CMS of your choice or any web app of your choice. There's no iframing concept here, so everything works seamlessly as the browser understands that natively. So as I said, all points mentioned in the previous Apex Hour sessions on Omni out are valid here. One thing that people often forget to do is to call the connection method to set up the connectivity from the card to the Salesforce environment. So unlike with the OmniScript Omni out, we have a dedicated method here which is called the initialize data source SDK. So make sure that you call that one to set up the connection for the FlexCards. And of course we have a trailhead module and official documentation that covers all that. So anybody interested into Omni out FlexCards / OmniScript, do take the trailhead module. Some considerations when working with the OmniStudio FlexCards, right? If you have an OmniStudio runtime disabled in your org, and that's why I'm explicitly highlighting this, right? So OmniStudio runtime is a setting that you can toggle in your org. If your OmniStudio runtime is disabled, there are some considerations to take. As we said in the very beginning, the FlexCards designer will auto-compile a Lightning Web component every time you activate your FlexCards. So that brings also some limitations, right? And the limitation is that each file within that LLC component folder cannot exceed a certain amount of characters. So therefore, we highly recommend that you come up with a modular architecture, create small reusable FlexCards that can be embedded into other FlexCards, instead of building one big FlexCard which might actually hit that particular limit. So please try to decouple and create small cards rather than one large one. Any custom Lightning Web components that you might be referencing within the FlexCards will additionally increase the size, meaning they will additionally contribute to an increased size. So do take some more extensive view of how many custom components you need, and try to reduce those as much as possible. make your event listeners unique to avoid firing the same event more than once, right? So as you know, the pub/sub would work across tabs as well. For example, in a console application. So if you have the same FlexCard referenced across multiple tabs, your event listener might fire more than once. And we have an option to concatenate variables within the event listeners, like the record ID, for example. So make sure that when you create your event names, you concatenate a unique identifier into those to avoid firing the same event numerous times. How can you find these auto-generated components? So each auto-generated component of those FlexCards, which will start with C-CF, right? Where CF stands for card framework. So all of those are auto-generated by us. And when the OmniStudio runtime is disabled, we strongly encourage you not to modify that auto-generated component, as that it will be modified the next time you deactivate and activate your card. Now, what about when the OmniStudio runtime is enabled, right? So what are the considerations there? The customers on the standard data model can add standard FlexCard component to a Lightning page or any Aura-based experience page to run FlexCards natively in Salesforce. Meaning you can drag and drop a FlexCard component on the page, provide the name of the card that you want to execute, right? So you're no longer drag and dropping the auto-generated component, but the given FlexCard component where you can provide the name of your card. Any updates, right? So any updates to the standard components follow the Salesforce patch schedule. So you don't have to install patch package to get any updates, right? And we have some increased or improved performance. So standard OmniStudio components run much faster than those that are in the managed package. Some considerations about custom labels. So packaged custom labels are not supported as of summer 22. And finally, when a FlexCard component is embedded into a Lightning or Experience Builder page, exposed attributes must be manually entered as a JSON key value pairs, right? So unlike having each attribute within the component config on the page, you would have to enter this as a JSON to provide these attribute values, right? Attribute keys and values. So I highly recommend also going through our official web page on this, but these are some of the main things that you need to consider when OmniStudio runtime is enabled in your org. Right, some best practices around debugging and general card issues. So what we recommend is, if you don't see your cards showing up, right, check your data source. If you don't have any data, temporarily set your data source to custom, use some predefined JSON, and make sure that your cards are displaying with hard-coded or custom data JSON, and try to eliminate what is the root cause of not seeing a card display. Make sure that you always had a blank card state, right? If for some reason your payload doesn't come from the server, you must handle such scenarios and show a proper message to the user, as well as, purely for you, for debugging purposes, you'll be able to see that it goes into the blank card state. And if you have not seen our previous session, we do cover states and card states there. What about actions, right? You have created some action and that action doesn't work. How can you debug it? Check the action debugger, as I said. Maybe your action is not picking up the right input. Maybe it's not returning the correct response. So make sure that you use the action debugger to see what's actually happening within. And really read all possible configurations of the actions, right? Read the documentation that is within the designer for each element, as well as our official docs, our official website. So you don't want to, lose time in wrongly configuring different elements. And of course, use the browser, right? The browser is your friend. Have a look at what network requests have been sent out. Have a look at the markup and see if everything looks fine to you. what resources do we have? We have some nice OmniStudio trailheads, and we have also another trailhead on building guiding experiences with OmniStudio. And of course, we have the official documentation on FlexCards. If you go through all of this, you should have a solid understanding of what FlexCards are, and you should be able to start working with those. So let's start with the demo. I'm in a OmniStudio demo org, and we will go ahead with some examples. Some of the cards from our previous sessions are still here. As you can see, Apex Hours, Child and Parent FlexCards. I'll go ahead and create a new one that will represent a list of selectable items, and I'll call this Apex Hours selectable items. Okay, and that's all good. Now, as a source type, I will go with a predefined JSON structure or a custom JSON for the time being. And of course, you could fetch these records from any of your backend services. It's just that for today's example, I'll use a sample JSON. This sample JSON represents just 2 items at the moment, just having some fields like the group name and then the selected property. So that's all good. If I go next, I can see the 2 items. So it's all looking fine, and I can finally save my FlexCard. Okay, so we land on the FlexCard designer. The card is still generating. Okay, it's already generating the Lightning Web component, and we can drag and drop some fields. So I'm just going to drag the group name and then the group quantity, and I'm going to add a new action, and I'll just call it select item. I'll hide the icon. I don't really need it, and I'll switch the action types to card and the type to select cards. The moment I do that, you see that it it did change the appearance of that action to a checkbox. Now there are 2 things left for us, or 3 things left for us to configure. The selected card list name, and this could be anything of our choice, right? We can name it in any way that we want. So I'll just call this selected items, and I'll go for multi-type of select. Of course, we can switch that to single or multi, and then selectable field could either be ignored, in which case the FlexCard will inject a property to represent the selection, but in my case I already have one, so I'll just use the selected property of my payload, of my data source. So that all looks good. I'll just align the text to right and just preview my FlexCard. Okay, so we have my my items loaded on the page, and we can see the data representation in the data JSON tree. We can see that both items are here and the selected property is false. So I can go in now and select one of them, and you see that the data JSON got refreshed and the selected property became true. And the same will happen with the second item, right? The selected property is true. If we switch to the action debugger, you see that every time I select or deselect an item, an action is getting fired, right? And I can see actually what is the output of that action, and debug that further if I need to. Now this all looks good. Our data is getting maintained, but for our example, we want to embed this FlexCard into a OmniScript, right? So there are 2 things we need to do. First, I'm going to enable OmniScript support, and second, I'm going to register an event listener, which will capture the selected items and eventually push them into my OmniScript, right? So the event name or the event type would be custom event, and I will go for select cards, and then underscore selected items, which is the name of the list that I have provided, right? So it's always select cards underscore and then the name of the list that you provided in that particular action. In my case, it was selected items. And now this event will capture that particular selection, and then it will update the OmniScript. So I will just call this update OmniScript, and the action type would be OmniScript. The action type would be update OmniScript. The parent node is something that I can wrap around my particular selection. So I'll just call this list of items. Okay. And the input parameters will be, again, I'll call this selected items, and the value will be bound to the list the list name that I have provided, which is again selected items. So that all looks good. So I will save this, and I'd like to preview again and just double check in the action debugger that my selection is getting passed, right? Alright, so let us go to the action debugger straight away, clear the logs, and I will select an item. Now we can see that there are two things happening: the selection of the card, which is the event of, the standard event of selecting an item, and then we have one more, which is update OmniScript action, right? So we capture every time the items were selected, and we are going to push that into the OmniScript. And we can see that selected items will contain both items. The first one has select true, which is correct, right? So that's all looking good so far. The next step would be to activate our card and then embed it into an OmniScript. So activate the FlexCard. Alright, our activation has completed. Now I can switch the tabs to OmniScripts, and I'm going to create a new OmniScript, and I will just call it Apex Hours Sample Omni. The type would be Apex Hours, and subtype of Sample Omni, and I'll just save this one. right? We already landed on the OmniScript designer and we have one step here. Okay, so this all looks good, and now I'm going to bring our FlexCard into the OmniScript by using the custom lighting web component input element, and I can search for the name of our FlexCards, right? And that will be CF. Remember, all FlexCards start with the CF prefix, apex hour selectable items. Okay, I think that is all we need to do for the moment, as we have some sample JSON predefined in the card. I'm not going to pass anything right now. I'm just going to rename this to CF apex hours selectable items as well. And we have to activate our OmniScript, as that's a custom component, before we are able to preview that OmniScript. Okay, our OmniScript is activated now, so we can preview. Okay, our FlexCards are loaded on the page, and we can finally try the item selection and see what's happening. So you see that the moment I selected that item, we got our list of items, right? That's the parent node, and then the selected items here. So you see that after clicking that checkbox, that item got pushed into the data JSON of the OmniScript, right? And if I select the next one, again it will refresh, and it will add 2 items this time to the array, both of them selected true. If I deselect, it will remove the item, it will leave only the selected one inside, right? So in this way, you could build your type of selectable items, right? Persist the data in the OmniScript and maybe pass it down to your backend services, you know, or use it in any other way within a guided type of experience. Now this all looks good, but the data is predefined within the FlexCard, right? What if we want to pass the data from the OmniScript into the FlexCard, or what are the options there? Now I'll go to my FlexCard, and I will take that sample JSON, okay, and I will deactivate the OmniScript, and I will actually set that JSON from within the OmniScript and then pass it down to my FlexCard. How are we going to do that? For simplicity reasons, I will just use set values, and I will create a new element name within the OmniScript, or new node, and I'll just call this records, okay. And here I will just enter some empty string, save that, and I'll go and edit properties as JSON, and I'm actually going to paste the array that I have copied from the FlexCards, right? And again, this could come from a backend service, right? Anywhere else. Just for today's demo, we're going to use some sample JSON. So I'm going to rename this to group 3 and 4, just so we see that we are actually passing the data from the OmniScript, right? And both selected properties would remain false. Now this is good. Additionally, we can pass a record ID to the FlexCard, and I'll just again enter this as an empty variable for now. And we also have an option to pass something called parent object, right? So that's an additional object or additional payload that we can pass into the card. that will be accessible through the parent dot notation. So I'm going to call this parent object, okay, and again enter just an empty string there. Now for the record ID, I can just get an account ID from my org. I'll just copy this account ID and go back to my Omni script and just enter that as a record ID. For the parent object, I'm just going to create an empty object here with some properties, and let's give this names. Let's give a name property here and call it Apex hours, and let's say version. I'll call this 1.0, right? So we are going to pass that particular object to our FlexCard as well. So that all looks good. We have a parent object, we have our record ID, and we have our list of records. Now we need to go back into our FlexCard, or the place where we're embedding it, and to work with the properties, right? So the first thing we need to do is we can pass the record ID. And that would be bound to the record ID that we created in our set values. So I'll just call this record ID. We will pass another one, which will be parent data true. Okay, so we are going to instruct the card and tell it, okay, we are going to pass the data, don't use your data, right? We're going to pass records. Again, it will be bound to records. That's the element of the node that we created here. And additionally, we want to pass the parent object as well, and that will be done through parent attribute. And we just call this parent object, okay, because that's what we created within the set values. Now this looks good. I'm going to activate the Omni script. Okay, our Omni script is active now. I'm just going to preview it. Okay, so you see that group 3 and 4 got displayed, not what 1 and 2, right? And 1 and 2 is the sample JSON that I provided in my FlexCard. So we could confirm that the payload for the card is coming from the Omni script, is getting passed from the Omni script. There are two more things we need to confirm: the record ID and the parent object. But we don't really display this in our FlexCard in any way right now, so I will just go back into the FlexCard, and I'm going to deactivate it. Okay, our FlexCard is deactivated now. I'm just going to use a text, rich text field to display some of those values. So we're passing record ID, so let us display the record ID first. So I'm just going to use the curly brackets in order to bind that. and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'll just give it heading small. Okay. Now the next one is some of the parent object properties, right? So I'll just call this parent object, and here we could display the name property. So remember, everything or all the properties on that object will come under the parent node. So we had the name and version, right? So just call this parent.name and parent.version. Okay. And so that all looks good. I'll just add a little bit of margin on the top, so it doesn't really collide with the rest of the elements, and we can activate our FlexCard. Right, our FlexCard is activated. We can go back to the Omni script and just refresh the designer view, and we can see that our groups are displayed, but on top of that we also receive the record ID and the parent object, right? So Apex hours, which was the name, and then the version 1.0, right? And this is getting passed for each entry of the card, right? You could also technically decouple this and have a parent FlexCard which will receive the parent object, and then it will eventually embed your selectable items, right? Just so you don't really repeat this all over the place or all over the repeatable items. But it all looks good, and these are basically the ways to pass data. You have a parent object, you have a record ID that you can pass, and then list of records, right, if you want to pass the payload for the card itself. And of course our selection is still functioning just fine. You see that both of the items are selected. Feature that I'd like to show is the recursive functionality of the FlexCards, right? So we have a list of items that we can select, and we can update the data JSON of the Omni script, and that's all fine. But maybe your data structure comes in quite a nested way, right? So maybe you want to recursively load the same card based on the payload that you receive. How are we going to do that? I have cloned our original Apex hours selectable items, and I have made it a child card. After I made it a child card, I'm able to embed this card into itself by using the recursive checkbox, right? So I have just dragged and dropped the FlexCard element into that existing FlexCard, and I have made it is recursive true, and that would tell the engine, like, keep loading the same card into itself. And we would have to also provide some data node, right, some payload that we want the FlexCard to display. And our sample JSON that we used in the beginning was having just 2 items, right, just displaying 2 groups. Now I'm going to update that particular JSON structure, and I'm going to add one additional node, and I'm just going to call it records, right? And records will basically contain another list of groups. Okay. So I'm just going to call this group 1 child 1, and the same this one to be child 2, and I'm going to do the exact same thing for the second item. Okay. And here it will be group 2 child 1, group 2 child 2. I'm going to copy this one and replace it as a payload for my FlexCard, and you can see that we have the 2 parent groups and the records node, which contains the child array, right? Now I'm going to pass as a data node. I want to iterate over each item and pass the records node. So in this case, I will do a record, which represents a single entry within the iteration, dot records, where records represents my node, right? So you can call this my list, or you can give it any name you want. Just for today's demo, I'm just using records as a property, right? So that's all we need to do. If we preview now our card, okay, so you see that the group items have been generated as well, right? And I haven't done any change to my original FlexCard. I just wanted to keep showing records as long as I have any records in my payload, right? And you can go down the path as long as you want or as you can. So if this card, if the second level card or the second level records have another records node, is going to display that as well, right? Just remember that it would be good to add some conditions here, right? So if records is not undefined, only then show the second card, right? Now this is basically the way that you could recursively iterate, as long as you provide the correct payload. And what I mean by that is that if my records here has another record set, right, the card will just keep iterating itself. So if I add another records node here, it will again show 3-level hierarchy basically on the UI, right? So it will display the first one, it will display the 2 ones under that, and then this one has another records node, and so on and so on. So this is how the recursive functionality of the FlexCards would work. One last thing that I'd like to show you is the conditional styles, right? So let us highlight the group name based on the fact whether the item was selected or not. Just because I want this to look a little bit cleaner, I'll just get rid of the child FlexCard for now, and I'll just add a conditional style, and I'll call this selected true, and I'll add a condition where selected is equal to true. Okay, and if selected is equal to true, I would like my label color to be black. I'll also go for 18 pixels font size, and I would like my value to be some green color, and again I'll go for 18 pixels font size. Okay, so this would be if selected is true. If selected is not true, it will just default, right? So I'll add, or actually I'll just update the default one. So here I will set the font size also to 18 pixels, black color, but if it's not selected, I'll just make it red, right? Okay, and you can use this toggle just to see what would be your changes, right? So that's all looking good. I would also like to preview this and see the change. Alright, so both colors are red now, right? I did not select any of the items, but you see that the moment I select an item, it turns green, right? If I deselect, it goes back to red. Okay, and we can do that even on a block level, right? So I can drag and drop a block, and I can put all of my items inside that block, including this one and this one, and I'm just going to make that block full width, and I'll do the same thing here. I'll add the conditional style, and I will again call it select block true, and I'll use selected equals to true, and I'm going to add a background color. So if it is selected, I will again go for something light green, okay, and if it's not selected, I will go with some background color, something in the red. Okay, so let us preview. Right, so both have background red because we did not select anything. If I go in and select, it turns the color to green and highlights the group name in green, right? And same for both of our items. Okay, that has entirely been done through configuration. No code has been written. I think these were the two use cases that I wanted to show you: creating selectable items, embedding that into the Omni script, passing different data types into your FlexCard through the Omni script. So remember the record ID, the records, the parent object. One thing that I did not mention is the option to expose your own attributes, which is entirely up to you. You can create as many as you want, name them the way you want. But the ones that were demonstrated today were the one that comes out of the card framework. They are predefined by the card framework. The second example that we looked into was the recursive feature of the FlexCard. So you could embed the FlexCard or reiterate the FlexCard into itself as long as you provide the proper data structure for it. And the final example was using some conditional styles to highlight items on the card canvas. So thank you.